Hello, everyone. I hope everybody's doing well. And today we're going to observe Small Change Why the Revolution Will Not Be Tweeted, essay by Malcolm Gladwell. So, this essay, written by Malcolm Gladwell, um, is an essay that exemplifies, I feel, exemplifies a model essay of the persuasive genre. Now, the writer, Malcolm Gladwell, if you're not familiar with him, I strongly suggest that you do become familiar with him because he truly is an exceptional writer. I mean, everything he writes is of great insight and intricate observation. I mean, it's really good stuff. And this essay is no different. Now, I'm using this essay to illustrate uh, its persuasive nature and its effectiveness under the persuasive genre. Now, um, in terms of structure, the persuasive genre can be understood as follows. Now, this is one of other possible ways in which you can frame the persuasive essay, but um, the structure of a persuasive essay is generally, you introduce the problem, and in essence, you contextualize the argument. Why is this an important issue, right? Why should I care about so and so argument? And of course, it makes sense that you position an argument as well. Otherwise, the readers, as they're reading the story or reading the essay rather, they may not sense where you're heading with this. So you do want to position an argument. Now, if you don't want to be very technical and direct in your positioning of the argument, at least imply it. And this, because I feel Gladwell very strongly implies what the argument is, and we'll observe in a little bit how he does it. The second aspect of a persuasive essay, and I think this is the one detail that differentiates it from other genres, and particularly the exemplification genre. I found a lot of similarities between the persuasive genre and the exemplification genre, but in this essay, it's what's called the concession. And the concession, it's where you as an author, you concede your position to the opposite side. Now, it almost sounds contradictory. Why would you want to concede your position? Well, in you know, for the sake of time and in a nutshell, it's so that you lower the guard, right? Quite often when you're countering a side and you're telling, the other party that they're wrong and you're right, right? If you do so in that manner, then you're not going to fare very well in persuading them. But if you say, you know what, that's it. You have some fantastic points, some very good points, and you know what, in this sense, I do agree with you. Well, all of a sudden, they might even be shocked. They're like, whoa, okay, what's going on here? This person understands us. And when you understand the other side, you're probably going to fare a little bit better, much more effectively than if you're being very upfront and very rigid uh, in your position. Okay. Once you've conceded, of course, you're going to counter that concession cleverly and respectfully and creatively. Remember, you're persuading, and then you're going to support. You're going to support your argument. Once you support your argument, we get to the conclusion. I often don't think it's necessarily effective. I mean, it can't be, but I don't think it's necessarily effective to restate your thesis. I think instead you want to leave the reader with a sense of agency. What can they do? What can they do to further empower this argument that you're positioning? Okay. All right. So let's observe. It's a beautiful essay, and some of the most effective ways in which to construct a persuasive essay, I think you don't want to lose that essence of storytelling. It's precisely what Malcolm Gladwell does. He illustrates these four young men that at 4:30 in the afternoon on Monday, February 1, 1960, sat down at the lunch counter at the Woolworths in downtown Greensboro, North Carolina. And from there, he takes off and he shows. You already, as a reader, you're feeling the tension that these young men are undergoing. That And so they sit in on that first day, and it's very descriptive about the, the context and the surroundings regarding that event. How a black woman herself, employed by the establishment, um, basically tells them that they're not very smart about the issue, right? A bit more harsh. um, but ultimately, he tells us a story how these four young men at the sit-in, it eventually came to be that this um, number of four winds up becoming thousands. We go from four men to thousands, thousands of participants in this protest. Malcolm states, these events in the early 60s became a civil rights war that engulfed the South for the rest of the decade, and it happened without email, texting, Facebook, or Twitter. This is his implied argument. Look at this event. Look how effective. Um, um, look how many. Look how many of um, what's the word? Um, um, Individuals are participating in it, right? Look how many people are getting involved. And how do you go from four to thousands of active participants? Well, it's certainly not happening with social media, right? Um, and this is what I wrote an argument. This is basically, now I'm proposing that this is, in essence, what Malcolm Gladwell is arguing. He, of course, is much better writer than I am by far. But I think, in essence, this implicit argument here is the idea that revolutionary acts that challenge and contribute towards changing the status quo are not effectively realized by means of virtual modes or social media avenues, given that such acts require a sincere sense of personal risk and investment, strong tie connections, and a well organized process of strategic planning and disciplined collaboration. Okay. So let's observe. So there's the backdrop, the story, the circumstances. There's the argument. Now we've got to concede. And the way he concedes is, oh, there's a Twitter revolution. Okay, it's interesting, right? Uh, we just said these means, these virtual means, are not effective for revolution, but now we're showing, we're understanding that the other side, there was actually a Twitter revolution. Isn't that contradictory? Well, he concedes the position and he says, look, we've got the Moldovan parliamentary election protests, a protest that was deemed a Twitter revolution in which the citizens of Moldova, pretty fed up with the government, the injustices, the inequalities. Um, and he says, Gladwell, and he also illustrates the protests in Tehran, Iran, in which without Twitter, the people of Iran would not have felt empowered and confident to stand up for freedom and democracy. Excuse me. Mark Feifel, a former national security advisor, later wrote, calling for Twitter to be nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. Wow. Well, gosh, if they're not effective, then why is Twitter even nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize, right? Uh, so there, he sets up this concession, and it's a very, very effective concession. It almost, at least, if the facts are straight, it almost seems, um, well, gosh, the other side seems more persuasive than saying that social media is not, or virtual avenues are not as effective, right? And then he counters. He says, well, okay, Western journalists who couldn't reach people on the ground in Iran simply scrolled through the English language tweet posts with hashtag Iran election. Ah, there we go. So we weren't we weren't really communicating with people from Iran. We we couldn't reach them, so we went through the English posts of people from Iran in the United States. No one seemed to wonder why people trying to coordinate protests in Iran would be writing in any language other than Farsi. Counters the concession. Well, now he's got to support it. And his first support, in which he illustrates a series of like anecdotal stories, um, is this idea of high risk activism, in which he says activism that challenges the status quo that attacks deeply rooted problems is not for the faint of heart. And it's certainly true that some of the mini stories he illustrates there show these young men. One of them actually states that if somebody yelled boo from behind my back as I was sitting at the counter, I would have fallen off my seat. The second example is an example of what he calls strong tie connections. Now, strong tie connections are generally connections in which whoever you're participating in this protest with, these are people that you're strongly bonded with. You're comfortable with. You know them. You understand them. And the argument is that weak ties, the types of ties on social media, ties that in which you have many acquaintances and not necessarily friends, seldom lead to high risk activism. Okay, and he illustrates that beautifully as well. The third argument, the third main idea he positions is the main idea of discipline, of structure, strategic and disciplined activism, so to speak. You have a leader in the case he illustrates of these sit-ins is Reverend Martin Luther King. And of course, if you see in the image there, you can argue that Malcolm X too was a type of hierarchical leader for a revolutionary party on his end, so to speak. Well, uh, the idea of strategic and disciplined activism, it's stated that a revolution, the requirements that a revolution requirements, discipline and strategy, are things that online social media cannot provide. Now, is this true? Well, if you think about social media, who's in charge? Well, everybody's in charge, right? Nobody's generally, in the sense, following orders. I know is this the military again? And not the military per se, but there's got to be order, right? And by order, you've got to have discipline so that things are enacted and accounted for. Social media, that sense of responsibility is certainly not accounted for. And how does he end how does he end his essay? When he gets to the end, he tells a story of a Wall Streeter and his friend, who the friend loses the cell phone. I guess they get in a cab and loses the cell phone. And they discover that a teenager has found it, and they begin emailing her to give it back. The teenager doesn't want to give it back. They get online. They try to they report it to the police. They get on sites like Reddit. They use mediums like Reddit, and eventually the phone goes from where the police initially stated the phone was lost rather than stolen. The media comes in and illustrates how these social media accounts are helping a Wall Streeter and her friend, or the friend Wall Streeter, recover a cell phone. Gladwell states, a network weak tie world is good at things like helping Wall Streeters get phones back from teenage girls. Viva la revolution. Now, the irony and the slight humor here is that um, now here's the thing. Social media. That's not to say, well, should we just throw it out the window? Of course not. Social media is effective. Is effective. You have acquaintances there. You can negotiate business transactions. You can sell things. You can advertise things. You can inform people of things. But as far as actualizing a revolution, actualizing the conclusions and the effects of a revolution, that's where it gets problematic. Okay. Well, I hope you visualize and you see the structural beauty in terms of a persuasive essay, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much.